Great job, Jenny.
Like, what did I say? Let me try to remember.
Welcome, everybody. We are here to talk about executive functioning skills at college. I am your host, Elizabeth Hamblet. I am the author of 7 Steps to College Success. Oh my goodness, what's it called? A Pathway for Students with Disabilities. You can see the cover here in my background. And I'm here delighted to talk to these 2 educational therapists about their experience. So I'm sorry for those who watched live and saw this, we already got started, but I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves again. Jenny, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. My name is Jenny Drennan. I am an educational therapist and ADHD student coach, and my private practice works one-on-one with students virtually, those who have learning differences, those who are neurospicy, and those who are a little anxious. And I look forward to chatting here and being with you to help parents learn what we think parents should support their children in developing before they launch to college.
Terrific. Thank you. Ashley.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Jenny. My name is Ashley Harding. I'm an educational therapist and founder of Northstar Academics. Northstar Academics is focused on 3 core concepts: 1, academic mastery; 2, creating socially, emotionally resilient students; and 3, creating a continuum of family to school support. What makes this really unique is that our focus is also supporting BIPOC students in independent and private schools across the country. So we really have a heightened focus on the needs of some of our students that we find are usually marginalized or overlooked, or certainly don't have that feeling of belonging in schools, and how do we support them from the lens of cultural relevancy, as well as to make sure that they've got the academic and learning supports that they need. So this is a phenomenal conversation. I have about 5 students graduating this year. I had 6 last year. I am a co-mama bear of sadness of when they leave, but the pride in knowing that we have prepared them to be academically sound, to be resilient, and to have the autonomy that we expect all of our students to have at 18 years old. So thank you so much, Elizabeth. This is a great and welcomed conversation.
Well, and I'm glad to have you ladies here because you have been, expanding your work too to talk to marginalized communities. And I think it's really important to make sure that everybody gets to hear what you have to say. Yes, that's the thing about being a teacher, isn't it? Is like I stay in the same place and students, I get attached to them and then they leave. Gosh darn them.
Yep.
Anyway, I do see some questions coming up, but I want to start by framing this conversation with sort of more global questions that we talked about in getting ready for this. So what do you 2 see as the big changes in the college environment that families, may not think that will greatly affect students when they get to college, but that actually end up doing just that? So go ahead, Ashley.
I would say there are a couple. The 2 largest are the personal responsibility, especially around academic requirements that families need to be really keenly aware of. There was a study from the National Center of Education Statistics that said about 30% of freshmen feel unprepared for the autonomy and required self-discipline. So when families are thinking about what does senior year look like, I think there is a push and pull of pushing in the right supports that afford autonomy and the ability for students to be more independent, and pulling back from families managing as much of the academic workload and support. And then the second is the social emotional adjustment. That strain of students not only leaving home, being able to emotionally regulate, manage their stress are such core components of executive functioning. And I saw another study that said about 50% of students entering college, which is totally normative, feel a heightened sense of anxiety. So parents can start to think about, what do we do around coping strategies from anxiety, from isolation, from becoming a more independent person, whether you're in the same city as home or if you leave. I think those are core things that people can start to plan for and expect just shifting into a new environment.
Mm-hmm. Jenny, go ahead.
I love that. No, I was just going to piggyback on, yes, a system of support for students. I think it's really important. They have that at home. They have their friends, their community, their parents around. Once they go to college, everything is new to them. The environment's new, the people are new. And so for them, it takes time, but for them to develop a core group of friends, a system of support is really important. The other one, as we all know, is the unstructured time that they have, right? Here, their days are pretty structured, and some students are pretty overscheduled, where almost to the hour everything is planned for them. even on the weekends. And so now that they've launched to college, all of a sudden it's like the gates have been opened, right? Now, what do we do with all this time?
Mhm.
It's a heightened sense of responsibility in terms of managing their homework, managing their social life, their personal responsibilities, family. There's a lot more that's kind of thrown at them without them having enough time to really develop the skills that they need to manage everything. The other, I would say, is bedtime routines, morning routines. They know
Mhm.
there to help them, get up in the morning. No one's going to come knock at your door and remind them, hey, you're nearing 8 a.m. It is now up to them, and the professors are expecting them to get to class on time. So, they're also choosing their diet. What are they going to eat? So
Yep.
all of these like training wheels that we have in place for them to sort of help them so that all they do is really focus on, their schoolwork. All of this is taken away. And so just because they got into college doesn't mean that overnight, all of a sudden they've developed all these skills.
Mhm.
Like, support them in developing these skills in term like slowly.
I mean, you have all hit on so many important things. The sleep piece is so important.
Yeah.
And of course the executive functioning plays into that because yeah, if you have goofed off for 2 weeks and your paper is due tomorrow, then obviously you're going to have to write that paper with a pretty empty tank if you are going into 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Same with exam prep, we know how important sleep is to that. Yes, the food choices are another one, and that's about planning too. If the dining hall has limited hours, you have to get there
Yeah.
when it's open. Class at my previous university job, I had a parent called my director, upset that nobody from our office would wake his kid up for class.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, not my own stories, but from my professional community, what I see online. Yeah, it's surprising what sometimes parents, perhaps more aspirationally, expect colleges will do for students. And I understand it's a big shift and they're worried, but that's why we're having this conversation, because even for graduating seniors, there is still time in the next couple of months to get them taking on more responsibility, because it's really important they have that practice. So, thinking about, especially, oh my gosh, the structured time. So in my job, I have to submit stats every month of what I worked with students on. And in any month, easily 50% of my appointments are about time management.
Yeah.
How to set up a schedule. Now, setting it up is the easy part, sticking to it is another thing.
Yep.
So, speaking of this, and Jenny, I'll start with you this time. What are some of the challenges that you've seen students struggle with when they have made that move? Like, what specific things do you end up helping them with?
Time management skills, I think that's the big one, right?
Sure.
Organization management,
Yeah.
study skills is another one. So, their ability to meet deadlines, their ability to pace themselves. Sometimes students will go, they can lock in for about 2 days and then they need a couple days to sort of decompress. And that's when we see students check out. They really they're depleted of all their mental resources. They need a break. So showing them some first, helping them develop or be aware that this happens to them, that they do go through these motions. The other one is accurately estimating time, keeping a pulse on time. Time passes, especially for our neurodivergent students, time passes really quickly when they're hyper focused or like in
Mm,
something really interesting. And so that's really difficult. The other one is being able to manage their medication, right? Storing it in a really safe place so that no one can access it, and taking it at an adequate time where, they're used to at, the same time every day, so they can still go to sleep late at night. But also the other one is students need to know how to develop their stress tolerance, right? How do they manage stress?
right.
What are their support systems, or how do they cope with stress when they get there? what commonly stresses them out so that they can avoid or, support themselves before they get to that state. So these are all things that I see students really struggle with when they go to college. The other one is, they're not taking advantage of the accommodations that are being offered sometimes at these schools, or they're not even reporting them sometimes.
Oh,
So
yes, research shows this.
yeah. And so helping them, become aware of what the accommodations are and also what resources the school is offering them beyond these accommodations, like the writing center, office hours with their teachers, helping them to take advantage of these resources is really helpful. Because I find that that's been one of the biggest things when students transition. Once they have like a good group of friends, learning how to use the resources that the school's provided has been so cool.
Yeah. Are you ladies familiar with Harlan Cohen, the author of The Naked Roommate?
No, but I've heard of that book.
Oh, it's a fabulous, fabulous book where, and I did a post, I think a week or two ago. We'll see if I can make this work. No, not really.
Yes, I read
Sorry, The Naked Roommate, but Harlan Cohen it was an advice columnist for years, and he's got videos all over Instagram and TikTok. And he's basically like everybody's college mentor, essentially. And one of the things he talks about relevant to what you were saying, Jenny, is like the 3 things you need to do, like all the planning ahead of time, like what are the activities you're going to do? He's got 3 things, and I was trying to do a quick lookup and I can't, but I can't recommend enough The Naked Roommate. And there's a version for parents. So do make sure you get those before your senior goes off, like, give them a week after graduation from high school and then make them read this book and you read it too. But yeah, so many good nuggets in here. The stress tolerance piece is so, so important. Counseling centers at colleges are overwhelmed. Where I work, it's usually you can have an appointment every 2 weeks if,
Mhm.
Yeah. But you got to get registered and do all that stuff. So, doing that before the semester starts is also a great way to just get ahead of everybody else. And, if you have an appointment and you find actually things are kind of going okay, you can cancel that appointment.
Mhm.
But, it's the same with the tutoring, and especially like the writing center, that kind of stuff. Getting in there early means that you have the option to not keep an appointment, but waiting, and even if you have a disability, they don't have to prioritize meeting with you other students. So Ashley, what are some specific things you see students struggling with when they get started at college?
I want to echo everything that Jenny said. And like you,
Okay.
when I was in grad school, I worked at my university's academic research center. I was one of their graduate advisors. And so it was so amazing, the students that started with us and got an early opportunity to engage with having advisors and having that support. You started to see it peter off by November, December, but they would already had a strong foundation. One of the things that I see not only with my existing students, but I saw a decade ago are living skills. So really helping students just manage basic daily responsibilities that were already taken care of at home. That's laundry, budgeting, being able to manage conflict navigation with your naked roommate, being able to and for burgeoning college students, please be clear, your roommate may not be naked, but there will be some idiosyncrasies in these new relationships that you develop. So part of that stress is being able to find your tribe of support, but being able to also live and be among people who might be very foreign to you or have different norms that you weren't accustomed to growing up. And so it's both the living skills component, but also creating those communities to support specifically for students, I think, that go out of state, that have a tenuous relationship, being able to go back home or go to places that are familiar. So I do a lot of work around social skills with students, finding workshops, finding affinity groups, finding community support spaces, finding spaces even in your city that may be off campus, but provide resources for you that are either reminiscent of home or create a grounding space for you. Because when we think about the transition of our students, we know that academically there are all of these supports that are insulated into the school, but for many of our students, finding those social outlets and finding those safe spaces can become a little bit more nuanced, especially as the world continues to have so many of the factions that we're seeing across universities now. So I always like to remind families that when we're thinking about those independent skills, aside from academia, what else do you want your child to be able to have that provides them a safe, healthy, and nurturing environment?
Can you define for folks who've not heard this term before what an affinity group is?
Yes, yes.
Vocabulary, yeah.
Yes, and excuse my fun jargon. An affinity
We all have
is, is a group that usually has a commonality around one of our social indicators. So that can be race, socioeconomics, region, any of the individualized characteristics that we may find a commonality in a smaller community outside of the larger mainframe or the larger majority community in an environment. So affinity groups on your campus typically are around racial, religion, gender identity, sexual identity, but they can also, I mean, I had a ping pong affinity group at my university, USC, and I had so many, I was an RA, and I had a couple of my students who lived on the Black affinity floor who joined the ping pong group because that was a big part, not only of their social community, but they found that that was a part of an area that allowed them to express anxiety, express physical expression as a coping mechanism. So I really encourage families that are considering schools that may mirror their independent or private schools to be very thoughtful of where will your children, again, find a community of support that either reflects their background, their ideal goals in the university, or some of those nuances of just comfort that they found at home that you may not find somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things I love about The Naked Roommate is he normalizes homesickness. Oh, another book, folks. I mean, none of this is all just my doing. Oh, I'm not going to grab it. The Ultimate College Student Health Handbook. I interviewed that author a couple of weeks ago for the podcast that I'm an occasional co-host on. But the reason I bring these both up is they both want to normalize that homesickness. And I think it's so easy to feel isolated and for students to feel like, oh, it's only me and this means I don't belong here and I shouldn't have come. So those are great resources. We're going to move to the questions from the audience, but while I'm pausing, let me just remind folks who just joined us, we are here talking about executive functioning college with my friends and colleagues, Ashley Harding and Jenny Drennen. Ashley is the founder of Northstar Academics, and Jenny is the founder of We Thrive Learning. Ladies, while I'm doing this and just trying to read, Ashley, I know you provide support remotely, right? Online.
Remote and in person.
And in person, and Jenny the same.
Yeah, mostly remote.
It's mostly remote. Okay, so if you want to get your students connected with these smart women, you can do that. And I'll drop their websites here in the chat. So let's see, our first question. What strategies do you have to help chunk assignments so they aren't so overwhelming and keep students from getting started? And then related to that, we can take them one at a time. What motivation strategies do you suggest for students who do get overwhelmed, parentheses, yes, ADHD, who want to work, but the anxiety and ADHD get in the way? So let's talk about breakdown and then motivation. So Ashley, why don't you get us started?
Perfect. So I use Eisenhower box. I also use, and this for my older students. So for Eisenhower box, yes. So it's a categorizing of urgency and importance.
Oh,
So
I'll look this
I
up.
typically work with students, if we're starting at the onset of the school year, especially for my college students, you've got your syllabi for the year, which means you have most of your large assignments, you have most of those due dates already planned out. So I'll work with students around how do we start prioritizing and looking at urgency. And so typically I'll ask them what's urgent and high importance, what's low importance but urgent, and we start to categorize how should our time be mapped out. And then I'll work with them backwards planning in their calendar so that we have baked in time each week to complete these assignments. Now, here's the fun part where motivation comes in. all of my students believe that motivation is intrinsic and it's internal, and until I feel it, I actually can't do it. And I've had them define motivation multiple times, and motivation actually is not an internal feeling. Motivation is usually guided by something external, and there's a reward tied to it. So that's where, especially with my students who I've known for quite some time, I start to engage with them around what are the rewards and consequences of completing this work. For older students, my students who are high school seniors and who are college freshmen, usually the rewards are tied to the sense of completion. It's a sense of freedom. It's a sense of autonomy. It's a sense of my family's not my mom or dad won't be writing me. My coaches won't be on top of me. I have additional privileges. So we start to escalate that at the collegiate level because we know that there won't be the same oversight as what they see at, but they do still have the same anxiety of the deadline is approaching. I still haven't done the thing that I planned on doing. So I talk about what that sensation does to them. And if we can follow the protocols that we've put in place, what would it look like to not actually have that anxiety creep up? How would it feel to have your Saturday afternoons or your Sundays free to do something optional versus racing to the library at the last minute? So I think we have to really design for students a backwards plan that works for them. So it could be chunking larger assignments into, as Jenny mentioned, that unstructured time. And if they can stay locked in and buckled into an assignment for hours at a time, doing it by class structure that way, but really ensuring that they understand the alleviating release they'll have by completing this work. This is no longer about just a grade.
I have encouraged students to, video themselves as a reminder later of like what it feels like when you are stressed out. And, that because it's very hard to keep that distant goal in mind and to be cognizant again of what that's going to feel like. And I don't know about you ladies, but if I had $1 for every time a student said to me, I do my best work under pressure.
Oh yeah.
And people survive that way. They really do. But I think I love Ashley's framing of like, what would it feel like? And part of it is they can't imagine because they never have. Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to that. I think, especially with their neurodivergence, kids who have working memory, struggle with their working memory, they truly can't remember what that felt like at a time, right? In the moment when they're going through, when they're planning or doing the thing, they can't picture what it's, sometimes it's really hard for them independently to picture what they're going to feel like. So someone like, a parent with support or a reminder of some sort to help them remember that is really helpful. So that, because what we do here is we really help them paint a picture, right? What is this going to look like, or what is in this for you? But I think the parent that asked more about planning, I think it's really important. I want to be mindful of when we say, what do we do to help to chunk it for them, right? Because we really want to collaborate with every student for them to be included in this conversation of what do they need to learn how to chunk. I would say 90% of the time, our students know exactly what they need to do and what the deadline is. And so they know the end, but then the getting to the end is really vague for them, right? All the steps that are required. These kids have a really difficult time in estimating how long tasks are going to take. They'll either overestimate or underestimate things.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, I think working backwards, like Ashley said, is really helpful, but asking them questions on how they're going to get there. So, if we do it for them, we're not helping develop the skills. But then if we ask questions, now we're igniting their problem solving skills, right? A different area of their brain, which is really going to help them to remember this moment, this experience with you, so that they can apply it later on when you're not around. And that's ultimately the goal of Ashley and I. It's for our students are not to need us anymore, for them to be able to manage themselves independently, right? And then for motivation, I think there are so many ways we could enter this question. For one, it's like, are we playing to this child's strengths? So as an example, I had a student who was really interested in enrolling in AP history.
History, yeah.
And in speaking with him, we realized that it wasn't because it was something that was meaningful to him. It was an external motivator that all his friends were going to be in that class, and he didn't want to feel excluded, right? Are they going to? I'm not in it. So really helping them get curious as to what's the reason they're doing the things that they're doing, I think is really important. So after working with him, he then enrolled in a physics class, which is much more suited for his learning profile. Still really rigorous and challenging, but way more aligned with his strengths. And so that was really helpful. But I think for students, I have a student, who there is no way around it. They're going to have to do some work that they don't always like, especially if they're still in high school. And so for them to really think about, what am I gaining from this? I may not like this content, but what can I practice here? Can I practice my reading comprehension skills or my annotation skills? What can I learn from here and take and apply somewhere else? I think that's because everyone is like, a personal growth is a value, right? So thinking of what's in it for me here and aligning that to their values, I think is really important to help motivate them.
Yeah, I mean, I always find, so when you go online, it's like, how do I motivate myself around something I don't like? And they say, well, find something about it you do like. I think that's really, it's almost like blaming the victim. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like when I was in high school and in college, I had to take classes where there's stuff I was not interested in, but that was how I got out of college, And so I think just setting up some rewards, like, if I get through with this part in this assignment, I can go do blah, blah, blah. Because like, I don't want people to feel bad, students to feel bad because they can't find something intrinsic, back to the intrinsic motivation, right? About a class and an assignment they like. Like, that is not a fault of theirs. But I feel like that kind of advice that people sometimes throw out, like, find something you like about this assignment. It's like, who's doing this? And what I wanted to mention to folks, for those who are not familiar with my work, about college, the realities of the college environment and accommodations and stuff. One reason I really wanted to have this chat with these ladies is that, unlike in high school, extended time for papers and projects is not commonly approved. And so if you're watching this conversation thinking, it's gonna be fine, my kid's gonna get an extension, they possibly will. Every student should ask for what they think they need, but be aware that they may not. And so in the chat here, I have dropped the link to one of my favorite tools, the University of Toronto's assignment planner. So this is cool. Lots of university libraries, for some reason, host these things. And to the lady's point, it's not, it shouldn't be a situation, if your student is working either at their school or outside of school with somebody who sits down and says, you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and this is how I broke it out for you. That is not teaching them the skills that they need. We should all be working our way out of a job with all of our students, right? And there will always be exceptions, but for a lot of students, they just need to learn about strategies and to get some help and support in starting to utilize them. And then a lot of them will be able to carry on without us. But if the adults that your student is working with are not, sitting down every session and saying, well, what do you need to do? You tell me what's on the agenda, then they're not really helping your students. So ladies, the next question. Ooh, you love this one. Ashley, how do you get students to recognize these important issues like unstructured time nutrition if they don't see that it's an issue? How do you get them to ask for support or even just acknowledge? And I want to start with, like, in high school, right? Because the whole point is to have these conversations now. Go ahead.
I'm glad that you grounded us in high school, because part of why, and this goes for even students I work with, part of why our students don't know that these issues arise is because they have so much support. And we've got very active family members who will email a teacher ahead of time when something's late, or ask the critical questions that we don't teach our students to ask on their own behalf. And so I think it's allowing families to pull back some of that support starting as early as junior year. Start communicating with your child. Well, I would have sent this email to your teacher, but I think it's best that it comes from you, so that they start to see all of the planning that goes into having not only the accommodations, but being able to work with multiple teachers across those accommodations. I have students that are teenagers that don't even know that they have a learning profile. They have these curated accommodations per class and per assignment that they don't know where that is coming from. So even diagnostically, they don't understand that there is something that is unique for them that may not, as you said, translate to the college environment. So I think there has to be a transparency of families to express, this is not only how you learn, but these are the accommodations that you've benefited from. These are the things that I do as a parent that supports you and allows you a certain level of autonomy, but you've got to start taking those things on. And then as students, really framing for them where we see and observe areas of frustration that they may have normalized. So Jenny and I talk about this a lot. I have schools that will say, oh, I only give 90 minutes of homework for students. When I have a student that spends 4 hours though, doing 90 minutes of what is assumed to be the process, I like to highlight that for them of, do you notice that it took you twice as long as you said it would? Did you notice that it took you 20 minutes longer to initiate the task? These are things that our students don't necessarily see. They're not primed to look out for. But I think if we bring that to their attention, it allows them to see that some things are more frustrating for them than they have to be. And so that allows me a conversation, especially at that transition level. At senior year, I start talking to my students and introduce them to their resource center the moment they accept the university's offer. And so we start going through, these are the people that are kin to your learning specialist on campus. This is going to be, and I don't frame it this way because I never want to let go of my kids this way, but I always say, this is your new me. This is the person.
Yeah.
This is
And
the new person for you who's going to support you in those ways. So it becomes familiar nomenclature as well.
yeah, and families should be aware too, there are schools that may have what they call executive function coaching
Mhm.
for free. Let's start with the free stuff. And so there's no, at least that I'm aware of, like master's degree or undergraduate degree, you get an executive functioning people. There's a private academy that does certification. How you feel about that is up to you, but they can call anybody they want a learning coach, an executive functioning coach. And that is not to say anything about them, except that you may be used to, especially if your kids go to public school, people with certification and background in a specific area. And so there just isn't one for this. There aren't college and undergraduate classes you can take. So there are resources that, frankly, may be enough for your student. And there are paid programs, if you're familiar with the K&W guide to colleges for students with learning differences. There are about 3 or 4 dozen colleges that offer fee-based programs where your student gets access to somebody they'll call a specialist or case manager or whatever. And so you can pay for that as well. But even those programs don't necessarily have people with a background in special ed or educational therapy like these women. And so to me, the best insurance is getting your kids started, as Ashley said, certainly by junior year at the very latest, but being more independent and scaling back, because you need to know what they can do without all this adult help. I think that your point about transparency, Ashley, is such a good one. And I put in the chat a post on my website with links to some podcast interviews and my thoughts about like well-meaning parents not allowing their students to know about their disability. And for those of you wondering why I keep using the D word, at the college level, it has to be a disability to get accommodations.
Yep.
And so I don't see it as a disability. I work with students with learning disabilities and ADHD. I adore them. But even though I don't think of it as a negative, it has to be a disability to get accommodated. And so it can backfire if students don't have any idea that they're getting accommodations. Sometimes at private schools, and I've seen, they're not aware that something's happening, and also, that there's a reason why. And Jenny, if I might, before we went live here, we were talking a little bit about the work you and Ashley have been doing, and trying to bring forward too some comfort to the BIPOC community. And is there something that you can add to that discussion here?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of stigma in all or, in every community. But I think especially right now we're seeing in the BIPOC community, it's just not as embraced and there's just a lot of unknowns. And, it's also the support that our students are getting. How are they seen? So in addition to being marginalized for X, Y, and Z, it's also because of their learning disability, learning difference, right? I think it's really important to go back to your conversation, Elizabeth, that parents really embrace, like, I know it's hard and oftentimes it's hard to realize, this isn't the child or what I expected. But when we do not share the diagnosis with the child or with the school, the message that we're sending the child is they're hiding it, right? So there must be something bad here. And so the kids, they know something's going on. So the more transparent we are, the more matter-of-factly, the more they are self-aware, right? And they can learn how and what they need to help support themselves and manage things. And they're not going to be embarrassed or shy of saying, I have dyslexia or I have slow processing speed. It's just my brain is just wired differently. It has nothing to do with my intellect. It's just how I process and intake information, right? For students to really be able to advocate for themselves in that way, I think it's really important. So I forgot the question that you asked, Elizabeth.
Well, I just said, because we're talking about transparency, because students are going to go to college and they have to be the ones to register with disability services. They have to, and then once they do that, to arrange their exam. Well, they don't arrange their exam accommodations, but every time they take a test at a lot of schools, they have to be the one to fill out the form to tell us, for those who are new to this, like, we are not case managing like high schools do. We have no idea that our several hundred / thousands of students that are registered with our office have an exam coming up in sociology this week. So it's students' job to fill out the form, get it to us 2 weeks ahead of time, and all of this stuff. But if they don't they don't know that this stuff has been done, and Jenny, to your point about transparency, like, if they're embarrassed about it, they're not going to utilize it.
Yeah, and I think it also starts with us modeling, right? If this is part of self-advocacy, for them to say, this is my learning profile, this is what I learn best with, these are my challenges, for the family to have that conversation with them so that they are aware of what's going on for them. I think once we make the implicit explicit, make it visible for them, it really helps them to manage themselves. Now they're aware of things. Oh, this is why it takes me longer to read, right? And this is why audiobooks are so helpful for me, etc. Now they're much more likely to use and apply the accommodations that have been given to them, or take a risk in trying a new strategy to see if it works, because now they're seeing that there may be some value here. Let me give this a shot. Now that I understand why this is happening, right? Why these things are a bit harder for me. But for parents too, I think a big piece in transitioning to college is helping their child develop self-advocacy skills. So how to ask for help and how to accept help, I think, is super important. And so I always tell families, it starts at home, truly, right? For them to be able to model, parents to be able to model how they ask for help and accept help and how they get through frustration. Our students, I'm seeing that they see us as, these perfect adults. We're not perfect. We're all human, right? And so we also need help, and we struggle with frustration and things just as much as they do. And so for them to see how we manage through that, how we ask our partners or friends for help, and how we give help and accept help, I think is so important for them to see that, so that they don't feel like they're the identified quote unquote patient here, right? But that they are like getting, this is just part of how society functions. We all help each other.
I'd like to, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I was going to say,
No, I was
like,
going to ask you to carry on. Yeah.
No, and Jenny said that brilliantly. And to speak to the unique concerns around the BIPOC community, we have to name, and Jenny spoke to it, masking and code switching, and what that does to not only the sense of identity, the sense of autonomy, but what that does in terms of advocacy. So for families who aren't familiar with masking, masking is when a neurodivergent student tends to put on, to replicate, to model neurotypical behavior, even to their own deficit. And code switching is when students of various communities switch their language from, and we may say, I would say, Black vernacular to traditional English and American vernacular. That has, neither of those have anything to do with intelligence or cognitive ability. In fact, it shows a strong resiliency and strong cognitive skill to be able to switch between the two, but there's emotional and mental fatigue that goes along with that. And so if you're a student who's been masking and code switching for the past 6 years, going through middle school and high school, constantly evaluating what you say, how you reflect back to people, even something as small as constantly reminding yourself you've got to look somebody in the eye, because in American culture, that is a sign of respect, that is a norm. But as an individual, that may be very uncomfortable for you. That creates a certain level of cognitive dissonance from your own need and being able to express yourself individually to fitting in. And so when we get to a collegiate level where we're expecting students, as Jenny said, to be advocates, to be able to know their needs, to be able to ask for their needs, we've got to unpack for our kids. And this, again, does start at home. How have you been masking your need thus far? What are things that you have started to adopt? What is language that you're using that's foreign to you? And I don't mean that it's foreign as in it's not your native language, but it's language that doesn't actually reflect what it is that you're trying to say and get your point across, that we can start framing and empowering you to use what's native. And those are things that we can talk around social emotional development as an executive functioning coach. But in our BIPOC community, these are almost secondary norms. We talk about code switching. We talk about how you and it is performative. You are performative in certain communities that you may not be in your own home community or your community of origin. But as a neurodiverse student, you have a secondary layer of where not only are you now performing to meet the standard expectation, but you're actually reframing who you are, how you learn, and how you show up as what's healthiest for you to meet the neurotypical standard. And so if we're talking to families about what do you want your child to start to adopt to be able to advocate, I would say that's a big area of conversation that you want to start having with your child by the time they make it to high school. It doesn't alleviate the stress and the pressures, especially for our BIPOC communities. These are norms that I think many of us know and that we've been developed to grow into, but they are things that if we can give our students language for, if we can alleviate some of those stressors, families at home will see a difference in terms of their child's emotional resilience. I have a lot of mothers who say, why is it that my child is performative at school, but when they get home, it's unleashed on me? Because
Right.
you're the safe space.
The
You're the space
decompensation,
where
right? Yeah.
all of those
Oh my God, what's not decompensation? What's the word I wanted? Decompressing.
decompression, that is where your student is able to decompress. And if we
Yeah.
think about for 8 hours a day, your child has had to have multiple reframings before they speak, before they engage socially,
Yeah.
before they advocate for themselves. So to come home to a loving space and say, I want to be myself, and there is a huge release. That's something that we have to acknowledge at the collegiate level. You may not have that with the roommate. So we have to start giving them those skills early on so that they know how to have more fluency for themselves. So thank you, Jenny. I just wanted to really make sure our families understood those are areas that we don't talk about, and especially in our private and independent schools, those are conversations that I think we have to have more readily and more often.
Yeah.
And ever the bearer of bad news am I. There are going to be students who will request singles at college who will get them. And there are students at college who will not receive them. So I would be careful about counting on always having a room to come home to. Now, part of a single room to come back to. Part of what I think Ashley alluded to earlier, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, but is, roommate negotiations are part of it. And there are supports at college, right? There are resident assistants who can help with roommate agreements, and students should be able to have a little time in their room by themselves. That's something they can negotiate if they need that sort of downtime. But I would not count on your student getting a single, although they should always ask. Ladies, how do you encourage a student who's graduating high school, I guess now, to accept executive functioning coaching as was recommended by the evaluation? How do you help them as a parent overcome their struggles if they refuse the coaching? Student struggles mostly with prioritizing time and effort, will stress and use up a lot of time inefficiently instead of focusing on the task at hand, or underestimate the time it takes. So Ashley, you want to get us started?
Yes, I think that the first conversation I always have with parents is what would make the difference. And I do have, especially for my high achieving students, I always tell them it's hardest for you to adopt it because there hasn't been a consequence that says that your pathway and the way in which you've done things actually doesn't work. Yes, there may be frustration, there may be long nights, but if you're a straight A student, in theory, you are seeing the data that says what I do works. And our brains are set to do one thing and one thing only, and keep us alive. So the moment that we start to make a change, our brains, our lovely carnal brains, are saying, no, this thing may harm us. This thing may take us from straight A's to something else. So I should continue doing things as I've done them. What I also do is I simulate a college day for them. And I remind them, if you could, and this is great during the summer, this is the rigor, this is the workload, but you have 5 hours, and we're going to have you calendar out how you spend this time efficiently to do this one assignment. And usually it's an assignment that's a little bit more rigorous than what they saw in high school. And I ask them to evaluate not only how did they spend their time, but how did that time feel? I'm very, very, very sensorial because I want my students to understand learning, only a percentage of your learning actually happens here. We hold and we keep score in our bodies. And so when we have anxiety, when we have negative self-talk, that also shows up somewhere physically for us. And then I ask parents to reflect back what they saw. And many times students are shocked to see that there's an observation of high anxiety, lack of focus, concern about the deadline, overstimulation, all of the things that we know that these executive functioning skills can start to buttress and support. But I want them to understand these are things that are going to become normative. When you're in high school, like you said, Elizabeth, you've got the accommodations, teachers may be more flexible, you've already got your support system. Those transition periods for our students, they don't understand. Some of that anxiety will already create a barrier. So why not have the proper skills, the proper executive functioning tools that only enhance your existing cognitive ability so that you can focus on what will not only collegiate life give me in terms of things to adjust to, but how can I make sure that I'm equipped and prepared to meet the academic rigor and expectation? So that's a very long way of saying I want my students to always see and have a preview well beforehand of what there is to take advantage of, how that can impact them positively, and what these true challenges are going to look like.
Oh, I love that. And it's hard to replicate the college environment while you're living at home. But seek those opportunities. Jenny.
Yeah, no, I just yes to everything that Ashley said. I think, it's hard for our kids. This is part of accepting help, right? Because what we're saying in theory is what we're saying is we're suggesting an executive function coach because right now you can't manage the demands independently, right? And so already that's vulnerability for them. And so parents to be able to approach this in a way to share with their child, we're noticing that this year has been really difficult for you in some ways, like, sometimes it's the night before the exam and we're watching how much you struggle and we hate to see you struggling like this. So really name the feelings that you're feeling, like, and also what you're noticing that they're going through, because remember, we want to always create a picture for them to remember the experience that they've had. And then for you to ask for permission, truly it's asking permission as to, are you open to getting some support this year? I'd love to, begin to step off a little bit, right? Step away a bit from the support that I've been providing for you, because I know ultimately you're going to transition into college and now manage everything independently on your own. And so I don't want this to impact our relationship, right? So are you open with having someone else step in and helping us so that way you can have a trusting private conversation with your executive function coach, and our relationship won't be impacted? Because I think, it is well-intentioned parents, I think, will need to just well-intentioned parents will, be reminding their children of things. And the constant reminders, even though, we feel like we're helping them, it doesn't feel good to them to be always getting them. And so really the goal here is for you to reconnect with your child, refoster your relationship with them, and have them work with someone else on these skills. They're going to hear, it's going to land differently for them when they're working with someone else, someone who is much someone who is skilled at asking the questions so that they can begin to problem solving, and someone who, you know, will provide that nurture and care, but isn't as attached to things as you are to them. You are the parent, so the attachment is way different from the executive function coach working with them. So I think that's a really helpful way. And if you, I have a whole article I think I can share with you guys later on how to have this conversation with your child. Other than, and the other thing is, you know, we don't want to just come in and, you know, you've been thinking of this conversation. Now I'm just going to land.
Right.
This is what
ambush them, right?
this is what I've been thinking. This is what's been helpful. Our kids are slow processors. They need time to think about things. And so Elaine always says, you know, you want to breadcrumb these difficult conversations, right? Like so that they can begin to slowly turn their wheels around things and then say, hey, you know, is it cool if we talk about this on Saturday? So that they know this conversation's coming. I think opening the dialogue in that way, it'll be much more received.
That's a lot like if you're familiar with The Self-Driven Child by Ned Johnson and Bill Stixer, which I love, you know, especially as they're moving into this age, like we need to allow them to make decisions and be those consultant parents that they refer to. And I'm seeing some comments here, and I can't believe we're running out of time, but I think, you know, a lot of people are sort of in that same boat of, you know, my student doesn't realize how working with somebody could help them. And, you know, one of the things I saw was that work might take them less time. I think we should be careful about what we promise. Our slow processors are still going to take a long time. Now, if we can eliminate some of the fumfering, if you will, it's not a technical term, but some of the, you know, getting around to it part of it, then it may still take them an amount of time. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, you know, it takes, I mean, you would like for them to have the experience of working with somebody so that they could see the difference.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes, especially depending on the supports we're providing in high school, they're not going to see how much structuring, scaffolding is happening for them. And they, you know, some of my colleagues really recommend scaling back the supports, even, you know, for a quarter at high school, saying, okay, if you think that you're going to be able to handle all of this stuff, we will take, you know, pause all of these supports that you're getting, so that students can get a realistic view of how they do without somebody. And that can be painful, but it is way better for that to be happening in high school, especially because of all the everyday demands of everything else you women have alluded to today. So the emotional regulation, the life skill, you know, the everyday, that what are ADLs, activities of daily living. So it's all of that plus the academics. So let me just see if there's anything very different. So somebody asked about, you know, where can they learn these skills? I guess from you guys, right? Your colleagues. And in the chat are the links to Ashley and Jenny's practices. You can contact them, and let me just see. So Ashley, do you give them a practice college level assignment in these, you know, preview days?
I absolutely do. I also encourage, and this is for my younger students, so my juniors and sophomores, I encourage parents to allow them to attend a college bridge program. And sometimes this is going on campus, and I do have some students who will spend a week or two at a prospect university, so that not only do they get a real life feel for it, but they actually sit in the lecture halls to understand. You may sit in a 2-hour lecture hall where your professor is not taking attendance. Nobody is checking your guided notes. You are responsible for the information and integrating that into your study platform. So I work very, very closely with families, especially with families where I know my students are a little bit more hesitant and hesitant to taking this help, to give them as much of a preview. But yes, I do have college assignments that I give to my students. I also, as Elizabeth said, when a family says, you know what, okay, we want to scale back these services, you say you're autonomous, I give families goals. And I say, great, not only are we scaling back, but proficiency should increase, because the goal should not be we'll scale back and nothing changes. If you have learned and you've adopted these practices, we should see some improvement. And that can be a wonderful motivator for students to say, well, no, it's fine. We'll keep this person here just another month. But I want families to understand, the more that we can preview the autonomy for students, it also boosts their confidence. And confidence is usually going to be a key indicator for success. So all of these previewing, all of the assignments, all of the coaching is really built there to just kind of give them a wonderful, surreal platform to practice while they boost that skill set muscle, but also boost that confidence muscle.
Jenny, somebody's asked if insurance covers executive function coaches or even your work as an educational therapist.
Unfortunately, it does not, which is something we, as educational therapists, the association's really working hard, because we're noticing all of this impacts our children's mental health, and there is a big mental health epidemic, right? And so our hopes is that one day this is covered by insurance. At the moment, it is not covered by insurance. However, if your child has an IEP, We Thrive Learning is an NPA, and we can partner with schools to provide our services free of cost sometimes.
And NPA is?
A non-public agency.
Okay.
In California. So I know a lot of your community is probably a lot East Coast. I did want to add, though, to Ashley's, yes, a college bridge program. I think 100% see if your child is interested in that. Having them go to sleepaway camps is also really important. And then so give your child a checklist, and you can message me. We have some here at We Thrive Learning, a checklist of like the skills that we kind of talked through today, social media or digital hygiene, sleep routines, etc. We have, and so that they can evaluate themselves, engage themselves, rather than us telling them what we think they need to work on. It'll help them self-aware of, okay, what are some things that I'm doing well in, and where are some areas of growth that I could probably start working on in high school.
That's wonderful. So, oh my gosh, I'm sure we could ask questions all day, but since you have work to do with other people's students, Jenny, just let everybody know, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can email me, Jenny at wethriveLearning.com, or visit my website, wethriveLearning.com, and schedule a free consultation, and I'm happy to connect with you guys.
All right. And by the way, be sure, hang on, I'm just trying to type. There we go. Check out, I've seen Jenny doing wonderful videos. She's got advice stuff that's going up on social media. So make sure you're following her. Ashley, how can folks get in
Thank
touch
you.
with you?
Yes, so you can email me directly at ashley@northstaracademics.org. You can also find us at www.northstaracademics.org, as well as online on Instagram and Facebook at Northstar Academics. And we are available and taking students both remotely and in person. And we do have students and families in Florida, in Georgia, in Texas, North Carolina, and in DC. So we've worked across the country as well. So we're familiar with some of the schools that many of your families may be coming from.
Well, I bet everybody who's watched this is going to want to work with you women in particular. So I would get on the waiting list, folks. I'm sure there's a long one. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, folks. This is a really important discussion, and I know it seems scary, but the sooner you start working on this stuff, the sooner both you and your student are going to feel better. Ashley touched on something I say all the time, which is that competence builds confidence.
Yes.
And what I really want is for your students to go to school, to college, knowing they can do this stuff. And of course, normalizing the idea, it's a transition for everybody. Everybody, their neurotypical peers are also going to struggle to figure stuff out. I can stand for having read half a psych chapter the night before a midterm. So, and I do not have a disability that I'm aware of. I just didn't figure it out. So we need to normalize that stuff, make sure our students know about those resources. But Especially, and if you read my book, and again, here's the picture in the corner, it's really important to know what accommodations they're going to possibly have access to, and a lot of the ones they're not, because that will help give you a realistic picture of what's happening. And so it may be that you need to have an executive functioning coach work with them before, when they're in high school, and potentially still when they're at college. But the more work we can do with them before they get started, and then, you know, take the training wheels off and let them go, they'll know that they can do this stuff. And that's what we want for them. You know, help exists at college because we expect students to need it, right? They should also know that we have tutoring centers, writing centers, because college is hard.
Yes.
But if we could get them these other skills, then they're only worried about the things that are specific to that college experience, like writing a certain kind of paper. And so with that, I will let you guys have an afternoon to get on with it here on the East Coast. So if you're watching this on Facebook, make sure that your friends know that it's here. It will live on my page. I'm going to put it on YouTube as well. And if you are not in my college transition group on next Tuesday, the 21st, I will be giving a free presentation on academic accommodations at college. So join me. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you found this helpful. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.